Good evening and welcome to the Capital Market. I'm Edidiong Iwang. The Acting Director General of the Securities and Exchange Commission, Mary Uduk, says the new finance bill has called for more tax reduction by the federal government in order to stimulate growth in Nigeria's capital market. Speaking at the 2020 budget seminar held in Lagos, Ms. Uduk assures that the Commission will continue to support the federal government in its drive to improve the country's economic development.
We appreciate the federal government's initiative of the finance bill. As you would, for those of you who have read the finance bill, you know that there are a number of initiatives that is in support of the capital market. We had expected more because we have been working on some of those initiatives for many years with FIRS and other relevant stakeholders. The government has, through the finance bill, answered some of our prayers, albeit there are others we thought that they should have done. For instance, issue of taxes. We had thought that the taxes could have been more far-reaching. Well, they gave us what they felt we should have. We will continue to push for more tax reductions in different areas. We also expected that government will give us some other, how do I say it, palliatives, maybe to some companies, to encourage them to come to the market. But we're still working with government to ensure that those are done. This is just the beginning. Like the finance minister said, that this is the beginning of this work. Because if you have to wait for the government or to go to National Assembly to amend or repeal certain bills or come up with new ones, it will take years. But with finance bill, if we have to do this every year, now we know what they have done. We will start again, to work towards next year. As we speak, there's a market committee, even without not even adding the effort of the SEC as a regulator, going around to engaging a lot of these companies, to come to the market. We also have a standing market committee that is driving this issue in respect of encouraging and engaging and bringing new other companies to come to the markets to list in the market. Don't forget that most of these companies are private companies, are family companies. So it takes a lot to really get them, to convince them to come to the market. I also found out that other jurisdictions have the same issue. I remember we were discussing the same problems with Saudi Arabia 2 weeks ago when we had a MEC meeting. And one of the things that they said was that they had to reduce a lot of their requirements, to get these companies to come and list. And by starting them with what we call like equivalent of a second-tier market and then gradually moving them into the main market. We are also looking at that. We are also working at what are those requirements that these companies find difficult to comply with. We'll work with them to ensure that we see what we can do, what they will be comfortable with, to at least, bring them into the market. We have been engaging NNPC, and we have even gone to NLNG, Mr. Gama?
No, what they came to the SEC.
Okay, they came.
We had a meeting with them.
Okay, so we had a meeting with them. So that means that we have been engaging with them all along, and I'm sure that when they are ready, because there's certain things that needs to be put in place before they are ready to come to the market. I'm sure when they are ready, they will come. We will not relent in engaging with them. We'll continue to engage with them until they are ready to come. For new new dividends that are being issued now, I'm not sure we have much problems. The problems that we still have in respect of unclaimed dividends are the legacy issues that have been there. That's number one. Also, the issue of multiple subscription in those days. As long as those people don't come forward to claim their shares, it will be difficult to wipe out those unclaimed dividends. Because if I have shares and I don't even know that I have these shares, because I don't claim them, either because I had forgotten the names with which I used to buy the shares, as long as they are not claimed, it will be difficult to know where to send these dividends to. So there are still the legacy issues that we are trying to combat. But for the people, for the new dividends today that are being issued, we don't have problems there. For that reason, we have been working with the registrars, we have been working with the brokers, to get in touch with these people who bought shares in different names, to come forward and claim their shares. Initially, what was agreed was that, I can't remember whether it was 5 or 7 years. They were supposed to have operated for between 5 and 7 years. The government had felt that by that time, they would be ready to come to the market. But you and I know that as of today, that none of them is ready to come to the market. If they came, nobody will invest in them. So I know that government is doing a lot to clean them up, to bring them up to speed, to get them ready for the market. Because it is only if they are able to come to the market and raise long-term, financing, that they will be, how do I say it? They'll be able not only for them to be able to operate well, have the monies that they need, to do their work. They will also be attractive to investors. But as of today, they are not ready. And of course, since you're in this market and you're in this business, when they are ready, we will all know. We're engaging them. We're working with BPE. But even beyond that, they themselves have to be ready. And they have been clamoring for increase in tariff to enable them to be repositioned. I'm not sure whether government has answered them in respect of that. Because for you to agree, for government, a responsive government, to agree for tariff increase, they have to see that you're operating efficiently and that your service, to the people that you want to increase tariff for, you're doing a good work. But I'm not sure whether that has happened. I believe that when they're ready, all of us will know.
Also speaking at the 4th budget seminar is the head of risk management at the SEC, Ikechukwu Umeano, who says the implication of the federal government's 2020 budget from the private sector perspective is not clear. Mr. Umeano's presentation is on leveraging the 2020 budget and the Finance Act for growth of the Nigerian capital market.
The budget is predicated on specific plans and initiatives. Some of them include leveraging private sector funding for capital projects, increased VAT from 5% to 7.5%, strict implementation of the Treasury single account, setting revenue targets, and cost-to-revenue ratios for government-owned entities, among others. As we are aware, President Muhammad Buhari signed the Finance Bill into Act in January 2019. The Act has the following, among others, as its objectives: promoting fiscal equity, reforming domestic tax laws, and ensuring they align to global best practices, introducing tax incentives for investments in infrastructure and capital markets, supporting MSEs, and raising revenues for government. Of particular interest to us are amendments in the Act that could help grow the capital market. The following points and recommendations were made by the panel of discussants. 1, Infrastructure development is of optimal importance for the achievement of economic prosperity and sustainable growth and development. Therefore, the need to attract private and domestic capital to fund and support critical infrastructure is paramount. Capacity building by capital market participants and regulators that would maximize and harness the huge opportunities in the market. Provision of conducive business environment and credit enhancements for SMSs to thrive, because the SME sector, subsector is one of the critical pillars for economic growth and national prosperity. There's a need for more hedging opportunities in the Nigerian capital market, as this helps to improve market liquidity and efficiency. The government needs to work towards encouraging the participation of the private sector in the Nigerian business environment. The power and agricultural sectors are key sectors where in-depth reform and partnership with the private sector are important. There should be partnership with the private sector to mobilize domestic resources, create quality jobs, and leave people out of poverty. It's important that government walks the talk, encourages sanctity of contracts, is transparent, and blocks illicit outflows of monies from the country. We need to pay attention to how to ensure that children currently out of school return to school, and also improve the quality of education, health, and general well-being of the Nigerian youth. We need to leverage technology for trade and focus on adding value to the agricultural sector, which is currently very low paying. This sector needs to become more beneficial to those involved. This can be done through means such as provision of power for crop preservation, thus eliminating post-harvest losses. Future budget seminar presentations should consider the aggregate budget so as to see the impact of the budget on the economy and analyze the relationship between expenditure and revenue. The Nigerian government has always budgeted for deficits. Though unacceptable, the government has no choice because revenues are weak. The budget does not relate to growth and job creation, and the implications of the budget from private sector perspective are not clear. That's referring to the 2020 budget. Advocacy efforts need to be made to government to conserve the nation's scarce resources, as this is fundamental to the budget. Some initiatives from the third budget seminar were addressed in the 2020 budget. However, issues such as public-private partnership would aid government, particularly in achieving infrastructure objectives. And there's need for a specific framework on PPP and concessions in order to address infrastructure financing, while a number of legislations are also required to support the Finance Act. We refer to the Petroleum Industry Bill, the ISA, and KAMA, which are still on the table. The Finance Act has positives for the capital market, and it was indicated that provisions on taxation of insurance companies might lead to improved performances and higher market valuation of these companies, and in turn further uplift equities. The Finance Act is the most significant finance policy made since 1999, and it has addressed various issues with about 100 amendments, some of which are important to us. Examples include the rates, the securities lending provisions, and stamp duties. Another important issue is the taxation of holding companies, which impacted investors in the past. That has been taken care of by the Finance Act. The Capital Market Committee should focus on getting government to address disincentives as opposed to always seeking incentives from government.
We'll take a quick break now, but when we return, we'll get some insight on the newly introduced long-term monthly Naira-settled OTC FX futures contract. Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us on the program. Well, this week, the Central Bank of Nigeria and FMDQ Securities Exchange introduced long-term monthly Naira-settled OTC FX futures contracts for up to 5 years, which became effective on February 13th. Well, speaking on our Business Morning program, the Managing Director at FMDQ Securities Exchange, Tumisha Koni, explains the rationale behind it and the benefits to the market.
With every product, obviously, there's constant market engagement to find out how the product is faring, find out what the investors need, the market participants need. And in the course of these engagements, it was apparent that there was a gap with respect to hedging FX exposures. And what you find, you had a lot of investors who wanted to do more in the Nigerian market. And the maximum term, if you will, that they would have been hedged at was 12 months. And then recently, the 13th month contract was introduced. So you had a maximum of 13 months in terms of hedging. But then you have investors who want to spend 3 years in Nigeria, want to inflow 3-year money and invest in the economy for that long, but they didn't have a hedge for that. So after, again, market engagements, the central bank approved the extension, if you will, of the hedge product to 5 years.
But then, given the volatility of the currency, do you think creating contracts of up to 5 years is the way to go in light of various macroeconomic uncertainty?
Well, and what a hedge product is meant to do is to manage this volatility. And you would argue that because of this 5-year contract now, as in the extension of the contracts to 5 years, you probably see more calmness in the market. So because you can plan, if you decide that you're going to invest in the economy, in the Nigerian market for 5 years, you can effectively plan and know what it is your returns at the end of the day with the FX side would be. The FX risk that you're taking is completely minimized or hedged, at least for that period, for that length of time.
In the risk between the strike price and the spot price upon maturity, is it the FMDQ or the CBN?
So it is the market, it is the counterparty. So what a hedge product does is, from the day you do that trade, you know what you're going to get, if you will, the FX at. So let's say I go into a trade of $1 million at, say, 360 today with a counterparty. It means when the contract matures, say it was a 6-month contract, in 6 months' time, what I'm effectively going to get my $1 million at is 360. So even if on the day of the maturity, the rate is 365, that's to my favor in a way, I would get the 5 naira differential from the counterparty I bought from, which in this case is the central bank. And since the product has been launched since 2016, there's been contract maturities and effective settlement. So where central bank is the one who is going to pay the settlement amount, that has happened seamlessly. And when it's the other way around and the counterparty, the buyer of the futures, is to pay the settlement amount to central bank, that has been happening. With obviously the help of with the clearing institution, that's FMDQ Clear Limited, performing the clearing and settlement function for the product.
So how confident are you that with the extension of these contracts, more FDIs can be attracted into the country in the near to medium term?
Again, this extension was introduced from market engagement. So this is essentially what the market wants. And the CBN has provided what the market has been asking for.
Will the 1 to 60 months contract still be traded on FMDQ?
Absolutely, yes. And the clearing and settlement, as I said, would be performed by FMDQ Clear Limited, as has been done from the inception of the product.
And how can interested investors access the Naira-settled OTC FX futures contract?
So anyone interested in participating in it would have to go to one of the banks, one of the authorized dealers, and they essentially will be the futures bank that are the counterparty to the trade with the central bank.
Now, finally, just before I let you go, talk to us about FMDQ's derivatives market project. When can we expect more products in the market?
So following the establishment, again, of the futures product in 2016, like I said, it was apparent that we needed more hedging products in the market. And FMDQ performed a feasibility study that period to look at what was lacking in the market. And over the last couple of years, or a year and two, we've been putting things in place to launch our first derivative product. Or I would say second now, once you talk about, as in once you put in consideration the OTC FX futures. So what we've done is we've had consistent market engagements, market awareness, and we're at the stage where we're developing the right system, the market rules, and all that's required to hopefully launch. We're looking at interest rates futures and also bond futures sometime this year.
Meantime, the Vice President of Investment Research, Robert Omotunde, has applauded the introduction of long-term monthly Naira-settled OTC FX futures contracts by the CBN and FMDQ. However, he sees some risk in terms of management on the CBN's balance sheet.
What they have come up with is based on market engagement, so it's the market that is demanding for this. And I looked at some of the people that are qualified. You see FPI, foreign portfolio investment, foreign direct investment, and maybe foreign loans, are the ones that can, that are eligible, for participation. One of the risks that I see there is, I see the central bank shouldering I consider 5 years too long for a contract, of especially for a currency like Naira, that we know that is highly volatile,
But she tried to explain that, of course, what they have done is actually to also help to manage that volatility.
I agree with that, because from the perspective, Nigeria right now needs the much of foreign capital we can get, because what we're getting from FPI is too hot. You read that in your introduction. Some of the sudden stops of flow reversals that we are seeing, most of them are coming from FPIs. If you're able to attract foreign direct investment, then they are much more stable. Now, a contract that locks them in, that hedges them, against the risk of currency depreciation or devaluation, as the case may be, for up to 5 years is laudable. So from the perspective of investors, it is fantastic. I'm just saying that from the perspective of the central bank, and especially for the management of its own balance sheet, I'm just wondering, again, they have the call as to when the currency will be devaluated or, as the case may be. But what I'm saying here, in essence, is that to the extent that, we know that some of our external sector, accounts are weakening, on the back of some FPI outflows that we're seeing. Maybe it's a little bit too long, although the risk will be borne by the central bank. Maybe that's why, it's Naira settled. It's an unconventional, derivative product, because it's Naira settled. In other climes, you will see that the futures is settled in the currency that you are trying to hedge. But here, central bank has control over the Naira. So to that extent, it is Naira settled. It can only maybe slightly overbloat the balance sheet of the central bank, should it happen that there is a significant depreciation between now and the next 5 years when the contract will be settled.
Well, that's all on the program tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Edidiong Iwang. I'll see you next week.